So our first speaker will be Medina Hassan. So Medina is a data specialist at the University of Sheffield's Data Connect team with a strong background in machine learning and artificial intelligence. She has spent the last 5 years applying these skills to medical data. Her work focuses on designing and implementing data pipelines that transform raw data into research-ready data sets. She also holds a PhD in scientific computation and machine learning from the University of Sheffield.
Hi everyone. Today I would like to share our experience in building our OMOP database and how we used it for a few ongoing projects. I will start with our first use case. The main ask was to understand the persistent, frequent use of acute admission in South Yorkshire, which is challenging for local NHS. We specifically need to identify the key determinants that drives that behavior and what makes certain patients repeatedly accessing those services. The insights we gain from this study will help policymakers and healthcare leaders to provide and to allocate resources more efficiently and design targeted interventions. We decided to use OMOP CDM. It's very good for this study because it helps handling data from multiple trusts. We run our project in Data Connect Center at Sheffield University, which houses a huge database called CureDBLUS. This CureDBLUS consists of 11 different health data sets which are linked using NHS England patient tracing system and consists of over 50 million distinct patients and spans a significant period of time from 2011 right up to 2023. Among the 11 different health data sets, we choose to start with ABC data, which is admission patient care. The reason we choose it because it is large. It's over 51 gigabyte in binary format, and in CSV format, it's about 260 gigabytes. And also, most of our research questions involving this data set. So it was a good start for our experience with building OMOP database. For this, we used Piano software from Evidently. It's an AI-supported ETL solution. Our experience with OMOP is excellent, and it was instrumental in building our OMOP database. The software features intuitive user interface and makes the complex mapping easier for us, especially we were, junior in this field. It speeds our development, and please visit my my poster where I can talk more about our experience with Piano. For ABC, we have mapped the minimum 34 NHS England designated attributes. That is mainly for cohort discovery. Plus, we added a few variables intended to be used for our collaborations with our partners. I can give more details about the depth of our database in my poster. Having building the ABC database successfully, we were then able to quickly run our analysis to find our solutions. So starting with our frequent users explorations, for this task, we limited our cohort to the South Yorkshire trust. There are 4 trusts that we have focused on. It's about 1.8 million hospital attendances. We focus on the adults, which are 18 plus. years old, and this study was for the period of 10 years, from 2013 to 2023. Out of the 1.8 million attendances, we found that there are 18% frequent users. We define the frequent users to be those users with 5 or more visits in a year. And our analysis was very quick using our database, our OMOP database, compared to similar analysis we ran without it. The main takeaway message was that the age and the socioeconomic deprivation level were main factors. Basically, patients over 65 years old and from the most deprived area were more likely to be frequent users. Our work in general, like for generating the ABC OMOP database for the whole England, and our work in this project paved the way for us to participate later on the Federated Analysis project. It's called Federated Analysis of Hospital Admissions in Yorkshire and Humber region. And I can share with you quickly some of the lessons we have learned. Of course, leveraging the OMOP CDM makes our collaboration much easier and powerful. It implies harmonization. However, quality of the source data is still critical, and also not all of the OMOP, not all of the crucial variables were easily mapped into OMOP standardization. Successful OMOP federated analysis requires seamless communication to make sure that no biases is running there. And finally, I would like to thank and encourage all the partners in those projects, Data Connect team, Evidently team, and our collaborators from Yorkshire and Humber SDE. Thank you.
Steal the podium for a second. Any questions from the audience? You come here. Any questions?
Sir, on your last slide, you mentioned something about how your ETL rules can influence how the data is represented. I was just wondering if you might be able to give an example of that, just an anecdote.
Yeah, for example, the way we built our database, for example, because it was huge. So we focused on the initial diagnosis. However, our partners focused on other diagnoses, like not only in the first visit, but also on multiple visits. So we need to agree in a federated analysis. If we are running something like this, we agree that, okay, we are using the same source or the same attributes. Another thing, for example, and some of our partners in their cleaning phase, they have removed any logical errors, like people reported to be died before the visit day, but not all of the partners apply the same rule. So we need to agree on these things before running the federated analysis, so that the data and the results are trustworthy.
Any other questions? If not, I've got a question. This may be a daft question. How different is your data set from the CPRD that was in the CPRD data? Does the CPRD data have augmentation episodes as well from the CPRD group? We have APC and HES data. So how it will be an interesting exercise to compare what you've done and what's in CPRD.
Yeah.
There are no other questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Polina Talapova, a Ukrainian pathologist and terminologist who leads the medical team at Cyforce. Her work focuses on biomedical data standardization, OMOP CDM integration, and vocabulary engineering. active OHDSI contributor since 2017. She advances the OHDSI standardized vocabularies and collaborates on international projects across the community.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for this opportunity. And I promise I'll keep it short. Okay. Oh, yes, this is what I need. So the topic you can see on the screen, it's a bridge in UK drug terminology and OMOP, NHS DM+D refresh via OHDSI community contribution. And the idea here is that you maybe already know that the heart of the observational studies at OHDSI are OHDSI standardized vocabularies. And any observational studies cannot be done without these vocabularies. And DM+D is one of the vocabularies within the OHDSI ecosystem. And the problem was that current version of DM+D was outdated, so it had been updated, had not been updated since 2023. This is actually a problem for the UK observational research. So, and now we see the problem space and aim. So we know that DM+D is the NHS medicine device lingua franca. It means that all of us in UK need this vocabulary for observational research. And the problem was also that DM+D was not in the OHDSI vocabulary roadmap, and you saw this roadmap. Anna showed you this slide. And what can we do with that? And there is the path. We can follow the OHDSI community contribution. And we did it, actually, together with OHDSI UK. Okay, next slide. Methods and milestones. So what we did, first of all, we utilized the old script developed for integration of DM+D into the OHDSI or OMOP ecosystem. This script was not ideal, but it was possible to run it. After the first run, we defined manual mappings and mapped actually these codes. Then we refactored all script, improved the machinery and the process, how this machinery processes the DM+D. Then we run updated script and also another script called build-RxE. It's also called boiler in our vocab community. Then it was QA phase, documentation, then pull request creation, and it is required by community contribution process. Then we communicated with core OHDSI vocabulary team, fixes some bugs during implementation, communicated again, fixed again. It was not ideal process, but we did it. And now, like many thanks to OHDSI core vocabulary team for their help and support. They made it real, and it happened actually, this refresh of DM+D. So we updated pull request and then waited for official release. And now, at the end of August, we just got the refreshed DM+D vocabulary. And results. So now we have currency, like version of DM+D from June 2025. And we added 20,000 new drug and device codes. Now this vocabulary is available in Athena, OHDSI Athena browser. I hope you heard about this resource, but now you can see, or Google just OHDSI Athena, and you will see this resource. The only thing that you need to do is just register there, because without account it's impossible to browse and upload vocabularies from this resource. And then in the download section within the Athena, you will see the list of all vocabularies available for download. And then you need to select required vocabularies. And what is important, DM+D has dependencies on other vocabularies. It means that you need to download not only DM+D, but also RxNorm, RxNorm extension, CVX, and SNOMED. So a lot of things to download. Also we fixed some like old bugs in the DM+D, domain mismatch, maybe not ideal mappings. And now we have the codes, like mapped to standard concepts. It can be RX norm extension, or CVX for vaccines, or SNOMED for devices. And it means that you can create concept sets for your cohorts in Atlas or other tools that you use for analysis using standardized terminology in OHDSI. And like call for action, please download the vocabulary from the Athena, including vocabularies that I mentioned. Also import these vocabularies into your vocab schema in relational database, usually. What I can say, what is important, run Delta queries and prior releases to compare what was before and what you have now using new version of the DM+D vocabulary. And also we recommend biannual cadence for this vocabulary and refresh it like biannually, but it's also possible to do once per year. And also, find out our poster nearby. It's number 35. I've got some very nice stickers and gifts for first 3 person. Please visit our posters. So thank you very much for your attention.
Fantastic. On my way here, I was reading through the bio of the presenters, and I had to Google what a terminologist was. And then it said down below that you were a vocabulary engineer. We have plenty of technology engineering roles up in Langs. We don't have a vocabulary engineer. So that's going to change in the next 12 months. The next job we advertise would be for a vocabulary engineer. Right? Questions? Jeff?
So, Polina, you described 20,000 changes. How often do you need to repeat this work? How often do you think that a significant number of concepts are going to be added? And what level are those concepts being added? Is this a generic drug, a new drug to the healthcare system? Is this an individual manufacturer's preparation? Is this a form? Is this a dose?
Thank you for your question, first of all. So we recommend updating the DM+D vocabulary biannually, because, you know, the DM+D has refreshes quite often, like every week. And it's the first part of your question. Why biannually? Because OHDSI community supports vocabulary in that way. They have 2 refreshes of the vocabulary per year. That is why we cannot change it. We cannot refresh DM+D like every week. And the second part of your question, so there are different drug products, different classes, like branded drug products and also clinical drug products without brand name, but with a dose, form, and route of administration, so different new drugs and devices.
I have a follow-up question to that. How much effort is it from your end to contribute that back to the vocabulary? How much effort was it?
In terms of DM+D. So it took us 2.5 months. Like 1 month for actual development and 1 month for communication and some fixing.
It sounds like we don't need one vocabulary engineer. We need a vocabulary engineering team in the UK.
Ideally, yes. If you work
to get
in OMOP.
actively involved in the international community.
Yeah, ideally. And
So Danny will find us a way.
Yeah. We will be glad to teach you if you would like to become vocabulary engineer.
We'll contribute at least one for Max.
Thank you, Polina, and thank you for traveling. And I'm sure that it's not easy to come from Ukraine nowadays. So thank you so much for being with us. I was going to ask some somewhat related questions. So these, of course, was a lot of work because this vocabulary hadn't been mapped or updated for like 2 years, if I'm right. What proportion of that work do you think would be necessary if you were to do it every 6 months together with all the other vocabularies?
Thank you for your question, Danny. It is difficult to predict how many new drugs and devices will appear in the data, in the source DMD data. That is why we'll see.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Marty Ketela, a senior data scientist at the Oxenford Group at the University of Oxford. His research focuses on generating evidence on the safety, effectiveness, and cost-effectiveness of medicine and procedures. To do so, he develops R packages and code to create and analyze the data from millions of routinely recorded healthcare interactions into OMOP.
Okay. As a good speaker, I sent the slides yesterday like with an amendment, and obviously this didn't work. So I'm going to present with my laptop. Thank you very much, everyone, for having this opportunity. I'm Marty Catala. I'm going to present a package that we built in our group in Oxford in collaboration with the Heron Network. So first of all, what I'm going to talk today. So hopefully everyone should be familiar with this diagram. This is like the schema of like the OMOP CDM version 5.4. That's all what we've been talking about today. So today, and in my 5 minutes presentation, I'm going to focus on like this table, the observation period, how to define it, especially like in secondary care data sets. So first of all, what's the observation period? If you go to this is like the documentation from the OHDSI official website. And basically what it says is that the observation period defines the time span per person where two expectations are meant to hold. First, basically, that anything that happens is recorded, and that if it's not recorded, it did not happen. These are like quite strong assumptions, but this is what we are meant to like map in the observation period. When you have primary care data, as some of you have and are aware, like mapping the observation period becomes quite easy in terms that you have like a registration and the registration dates. So you can use those dates as observation period. What happens when you have secondary care data, then you have like visits, drugs, and it's like, okay, do the person is in observation only when they have a visit, only when they have a prescription? What happens in this case? So then what we did was like, so there are many collaborators here in the room, and we started like asking people what they were doing. The first guys, they said, oh, we are mapping the observation period as first record that a person has in the database till the data extraction. And this is how like the number of individuals in the database, it looked like for that definition. And it's like, okay, this makes sense. But then you go to the second one, and the second one said, oh, in fact, we are mapping from the first observation till the last observation of a person. So like when they have like the last visit, we consider that that's the end of observation. And then this is how it looks like. And we go to a next one, and as you can guess, like it was not the same answer. And then they said, oh, we are only consider them in observation when they have a visit. Or we collapse all the records. Or we collapse all the records, but just within a year. Or we collapse all the records within a year, and we are like a year of follow-up. And as you can see, like we found out many, many different definitions. The problem of this is like, none of them is right or wrong. Like each one of them, like it's meant for like different uses. The problem is like we cannot compare results from one data across different databases if we don't have like this standardized. As you can see, like if you compare the red one with the green one, that's quite extreme. But like you can see that like anything that we would do like would change like by 10 times. So that can have like a very strong impact when we are comparing our results. And then it was like, okay, we have to solve this. So when we have a problem in our team, what we do is like to build an R package, and that's what we've done basically. So what I was saying, there is no right or wrong definition. Each one of it has its own purpose, and the only thing is that we need the ability to be able to define observation period differently depending on the use case. And that's why we've built OMOP constructor. So OMOP constructor, basically now for the moment, as any package that we start like small. We have like one important function that is like this function, quite intuitive, build observation period, used to build the observation period. Basically, the first thing that you pass is like the CDM object. It's a connection to all the tables in the database. And then the parameterization, you can, like, for example, decide on like collapse days to collapse records that are like separated a certain number of days to collapse them in a single era. You can like add a persistent window at the end saying, oh, it doesn't end when the last visit, in the last visit, we add like a persistent window of 1 year or whatever days. Things that we can do also, like set up a date range. Obviously, like we would censor at the data extraction date, but we can also start, if we have a date of reliability, for example, we would start the observation periods only on that date. So we can like trim down the observation periods using a date range of reliability. And we censor by age, especially on those data sets that don't have like linked mortality data. At some point, we have to censor the individuals, or sometimes we are going to miss some mortality records. And finally, we have this parameter that is records from. That is like, where do I get my record from? Like usually we would populate this with visits and drug exposure, but it's up to you to decide which tables do you want to use and which records do you want to use. And as mentioned before, like any observation period, regardless of like the parameterization, we always censor when there is like a record of death. I'm running late. But yeah, as I'm saying, like there is no right or wrong, but like we have to parameterize the package. So we've decided by default to parameterize in a way that it's the first record to data extraction as default. This is also the default of the Heron UK network. And this is how we've decided to parameterize the package. But as mentioned before, you can like play with all these parameters and customize it your own way. And now finishing, I have this nice hex sticker generated by ChatGPT, but yeah, I think it's quite nice. I'm gonna tweak it a bit and so. But yeah, then home constructor has already been used in studies. I already mentioned the antibiotics here in UK study, so we used that. Ellen used that to build the observation periods, so they are consistent across the different databases, and we could compare the results. We conduct automatically test across several database management systems. This is everything done automatically to make sure that we support them. We have a Docker image thanks to James, and we have like, this is the first release, 0.1, and more features to come. There is the QR code that goes to the website with the documentation, and I'm also happy to share that I have a software demonstration in like 30 minutes, so if anyone is interested, just come and I'll show you more details. Thank you.
Thank you, Marty. You build beautiful things in an ugly language. So I've got a question. So, well, it's a two-parter, really. The first question is, so when you run this, is this making entries in the OMOP observation period table?
Yes.
The CDM, it is?
Yeah, like this is on you. When you create the CDM object,
Right.
you choose a write schema, right?
So you will get a
So
new...
you will create a table named observation period in the write schema.
Right.
If you would set write schema as the CDM schema, you are going to overwrite your observation period definition. But this is on you, depending on what's the use case. If it's like a study by study basis, then you want it in the write schema. If you want it like an ETL at ETL stage, you want to put it in the CDM schema.
Perfect. So the second follow-up to that question is, and most of the people in the crowd here will know how fundamental the observation period is, because presumably for most studies, it defines your denominator, for lack of a better way of describing it, correct? So this problem that we recognize in the UK, I'm sure is a problem across Europe and everywhere else. So what is, in future, is there a purpose for the observation period table in the OMOP CDM, or should the de facto standard be that it should be created dynamically? study to study? Do you have a view on that? What's the purpose of having an observation period in the CDM if this is the way it should be?
So I think that observation period makes sense in some of the, well, it always makes sense. In some of the data sets, it's more clear how to build it. So there is no, like, if you are using CPRD primary care data, this package, like, I would not use it. Like, you have like a clear observation period. When like you are using data where like that definition is not so clear, it's where like it's more a matter of consistency and being able that when I'm gonna send code to you and send code to data log, to be sure that both of you define the observation period in the same way, because otherwise that's the first, we had like lots of heterogeneity in incident results, and it's like, oh, it's because the databases are different and it's heterogeneity in the population and the settings, or is it that the observation period is playing a role?
This is very, very nice work, in part because I've never thought hard about observation periods, and now I'm going to. So wonderful, wonderful work. I have a conceptual question that I do not necessarily expect an answer to, but I'm wondering if this consistency, if you really expect observation periods to be consistent, say, for example, for hospital data versus primary care data, where in hospital you can say, oh, I really need an inpatient visit to make sure I have observation of a person, as opposed to primary care data where there will be no expectation. So I guess, my question was, when you think of consistency, was it because you had some requirements for the study, or because you really thought that, okay, we do strive for consistency regardless of the provenance of the data?
No, so when I was speaking about consistency, it was more consistency between hospitals than like between secondary care and primary care. We know that it's tricky always to compare, and it will always be, regardless of whatever observation period you use, to compare results from like a secondary care or primary care.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Hi, Joe Crawford, TVS SDE. Thanks a lot for the presentation. I think James and colleagues have been using your code as part of our OMOP mapping, also of HES, APC and stuff. It's really difficult as a regional data source to actually make the strong assumption about observation being complete, because people go outside your region, so you lose it. Is there any work that you're aware of, or any thoughts on, is there a way of capturing perhaps the reality, in the sense that the observation is actually partial, which is much more difficult to do things with, but the fact that a lot of the data we have, the truth is we just can't make the strong assumption that the observations are actually complete globally?
Yeah, so when I was preparing the presentation and like I put in like the definition of observation period, I thought like, oh, this is like quite two strong assumptions that are not like always met. Yeah. And this is more like on at the documentation level, when you write like the limitations of like your database, things like that you say, oh, we define the observation period like that, but maybe I don't have like records of drugs, or I don't have records of procedures, or only I have this data available from that time to that time. But yeah.
Be quick. Thanks, Marty. So the premise of this is to provide consistency in secondary care data. You can see on that chart, there was many ways of doing it. We had different results. Wouldn't you get the same sort of problem if you allow the user to set the collapse period and the other settings? Because they're configurable, there's still opportunity for variation, because each trust could pick different figures.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I think you want is that like we just eliminate all the last part, and it's like just build observation period and that's it. But we still, so that's the idea by default, but we still want to, we believe that there will be use cases where you will need like a different observation period for like different analysis, or sometimes more like as a sensitivity analysis. Or if you want to compare with like other data sets that they were like using like other definitions. I agree that by default it would be nice, and that's what we are trying to do in the Heron UK network, that everyone like maps the observation period the same way, and then maybe the package even doesn't need to exist because like we just like, well, you execute once and that's it. But still we wanted this possibility of customization, basically because if you start asking these people like what they want, like you're gonna get like always different answers. So better provide them the tools to get these different answers.
Marty, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next topic.
To complete this session, we now have Nico Muller-Grell, a PhD student at King's College London, also studying medicine at Heidelberg University and economics at Mannheim University, because why stop at just one?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Nico. I'd like to talk to you about a bit of open source work we are currently working on at Langs and King's collaboratively. I think most of you know about the values of OMOP already, so I don't lose too many words about that, as that has been exemplified by all of the great work which was previously presented. However, OMOP can be quite complex as well, because the nature of clinical data is inherently complex, and OMOP depicts and captures this quite well. However, that leads to complex relationships between different tables, between different IDs, and you'd have to have a very certain skill set to navigate that. On the one hand, the data sciencey bit, deep knowledge of SQL, as exemplified on the left-hand side. You'd have to read that, you'd have to generate that, deep knowledge about the OMOP, and clinical insights, navigating the vocabularies, navigating what you want to get out of the system. And we as a community have put great efforts into coming up with tools navigating this complexity, like Usagi, getting data into your systems, Darwin and Atlas, navigating the complex analyses to gain real-world evidence. However, what if we could take all of that a step further and making the access to OMOP as easy as just asking the right questions? How many of my patients have actual diabetes? So we are used to that already from interacting with ChatGPT, with Anthropic Claude, or whatever model we're currently using. So why not take that to the healthcare space, and especially to OMOP? So that's where I'd like to introduce Fast OMOP, which is an agentic workflow trying to get exactly there, from asking a question to querying your live database and getting reliable answers back. So you'd have a workflow where you'd have an orchestrator agent breaking down your question into achievable tasks for LLM agents, which then collaborate on that task, achieving them and querying your database, giving the answer to your question from your live patient database. However, for that, you'd need something to do the heavy lifting. LLMs are very flexible, but you'd need deterministic tools, and that's where you'd need the OMCP, which are MCP servers, which you could think of as giving an agent a toolbox, which you can then execute. So you'd have OMOP access to your database, you'd have R analyses, Python sandboxes, etc., which you can then use to navigate all of that complexity. And then you'd get back your answer. However, it's not as easy as just asking ChatGPT, because if you end up at the wrong restaurant because you asked ChatGPT, that's not as severe as asking clinical questions, which have dire consequences if answered wrongly. So getting up the guardrails is essential. That's where we meet explainability and trust. So explainability basically means we break down the task into all of the different subtasks, meticulously map and trail them, and creating an audit trail which goes from black box operations to glass box operations. You see all the mappings, all the generated queries, the answers, and you can trail what's actually happened underneath the whole. And on the other side, you'd have to set boundaries where you don't delete the last drug exposure or identify patient X just by inputting a query. So all of this operates in the principle of least privilege, The agents only get the permissions they need to accomplish the task. You'd have a clear separation of concern. The flexibility of the LLM is outsourced, and the deterministic tools take over the actual database querying. And you'd have rigorous input and output validation to ensure all of the data going in and out is actually right. So taking this from concept into application, we created an evaluation framework building up from work which is already out there from AWS called Nostos. We derived 50 natural language and SQL pairs, executed them against a known database, and came up with our gold standard. Then we compared the actual queries we put through our system and came up with a 94 accuracy overall and 20.6 seconds in query speed. However, we'd have to point out that with 50 questions, this is a limited data set currently, and we are at the stage of single execution reasoning. So we want to get where we'd have more complex tasks, like real analysis, but right now it's more asking the question, how many patients have diabetes? So to give a little bit of an outline, we want to implement conversational memory, where you'd have the patient's history remembered throughout a conversation in clinical use. We want to enhance concept retrieval and reasoning through incorporating OMOP knowledge graphs directly on the vocabulary. We want to implement continuous learning, so the system improves over time with each interaction with the databases. And we want to broaden the tool set, incorporating all of the great work from Darwin, from Atlas, etc., giving them as the toolboxes to these systems. Last but not least, I'd like to point out that all of this is ongoing team effort, and thank my supervisors, Vish and Richard, as well as my teammates, Shihao and Josh. Thank you.
That was fantastic, Nico. Nico, like any good PhD student, makes me feel young and old simultaneously. Questions?
Are there any concerns that people should have that if you're developing an agent that you might end up inadvertently answering a question that has the implication of a clinical or medical purpose result that might trip that kind of thing into a medical device territory?
Yes, definitely. If you just put it out there as a tool advising clinicians directly, that would go into that area. Right now, we're at the stage of working with synthetic data. We want to apply that then to LENC's teaching hospital trust data, work with that, and then work up the ladder to some point get there.
Will this question answer can be applied into clinical notes table?
Sorry?
A clinical notes table, which is unstructured data.
Yeah. So currently what this does is querying the SQL databases for if they contain the actual free text nodes that could be incorporated, but that need like more natural language processing on the other side. So it is technically possible to apply that as well, but currently we're working with the structured side of data more.
Could you please illustrate more a scenario in clinical setting to apply the question answering?
How this could be applied in clinics?
In the clinician workflow.
So basically, if you come morning into clinic and want to get an overview of your patients, you could ask systems like this in the future, not at this point, but in the future, you'd ask, hey, what have been the last couple of drug exposures my patient, which I saw yesterday, has had. So you don't have to query the database yourself, you don't have to go through all of the systems, but you ask, you get the answer, and maybe have a speed up in that process of getting an overview again.
What do you think is the advantage compared with the CDSS software?
With which software?
Your advantage compared with the CDSS function. clinician decision support. They also
yeah.
embedded HR.
So we don't want to dive into that right now.
Yeah.
It is
Sorry.
just a proof of concept at the moment. We want to develop in directions like that and explore all of that, but currently it's just proving the concept that the access to OMOP data could be simplified a bit from SQL queries towards natural language interaction.
Yes, thanks for your answering.
Thank you.
Hey, Nico. Thanks for a really helpful, in a nutshell, overview of this project. I can see you've got a really fab team. What extra, if you had a magic wand, what would overcome your current challenges?
I think there has been quite interesting recent work that is on the hallucination bit of LLMs and quantifying how much LLMs hallucinate. If you'd solved that already, that would pose huge impact to that because, yeah.
You'd be up the ladder.
Yeah, that's a very big one.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Could you give us an example of the trickier queries this has solved, other than you know, basic counts?
So the complexity of questions we used starts from simple counts, as then goes up the ladder towards distributions, how many of our patients are male, female, etc. Then you'd get a step further where you need to query the concepts, for example, condition occurrences, medications, drug exposures, etc. And if you combine that then with timeframes and where you get into the area of cohort creation, that is complex territory. So we are currently at the stage where you could query for co-occurrences, so you'd have different drug exposures. The system is able to retrieve that data. If you ask how many of my patients have been given drug X and Y in this time frame, we're at that stage. If you want to take it further and want to take it into real analysis territory, that's where we're working at right now.
Just as a caveat to all of that, because Nico and I work very closely on this, if you think of the work that we're doing as a timeline in Marvel, and the Odyssey universe is a timeline in Marvel, then Nico and Shihao are like Doctor Strange trying to pull those two timelines together. So it's massively complex work, and we're literally, well, not even scratching the surface yet. So I don't want people to go away thinking that next year we'll come back and Ed and Marty will be out of work because we've got a multi-agent workflow writing papers. That's not going to happen.
No.
Thank you very much, Nico. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks again to all our speakers. If I've got the agenda right, I think we now have a 1-hour poster session. So if you want to follow up with any of our speakers, you'll find them in that area, and also discover a new round of posters since this morning.